Walk 3rd, 1943. Harbor of Tunis, Tunisia. The Mediterranean sun beat down savagely as German supply officers directed depleted unit battling to empty ammo cartons from transport ships. Each wooden carton weighed over 200 pounds and required 4 officers utilizing ropes and ad-libbed wooden slopes to move from ship's hold onto the dock. This was how the Wehrmacht moved supplies through teach, organization, and the crude quality of German officers. For months prior, American strength had landed in Morocco and Algeria as portion of Operation Burn. Reports sifting through German insights said American utilized a mechanical lifting gear at their supply stations, gadgets that killed much of the manual labor Germans considered fundamental to military teach. The Wehrmacht coordination's tenet, refined through campaigns in Poland, France, and Russia, expelled such mechanical helps as proof of American physical and ethical shortcoming. After all, what kind of trooper required a machine to lift what his possessed hands seemed carry? This cavalier demeanor toward American materials taking care of innovation would demonstrate to be one of the Wehrmacht's most expensive miscounts. What German officers deciphered as delicateness was really a progressive approach to coordinations that would offer assistance bury the Africa Corps beneath a torrential slide of effectively conveyed supplies. The basic forklift derided by German quarter experts as pointless extravagance spoken to a principal contrast in understanding cutting-edge mechanical fighting that would demonstrate unequivocal. The German military of 1943 worked on standards that would have been recognizable to armed forces from the past century. In spite of spearheading quick assault strategies that emphasized speed and mechanization in combat operations, German coordinations remained shockingly primitive. A standard German infantry division supply utilized 256 trucks, supplemented by 2,652 steeds, requiring over 4,000 men fair to move supplies from railheads to the front. This gigantic labor venture and coordinations implied less warriors accessible for combat operations. The inconsistency was dazzling. The same military that had created progressed tanks, modern strategies, and progressive operational concepts still moved most of its supplies utilizing strategies Napoleon would have recognized. German warriors shaped human chains to stack ammo, rolled barrels up wooden boards, and carried supplies on their backs over separations that American troops secured with mechanized transport. This wasn't simply a matter of assets. It reflected an essential philosophical distinction around the nature of military proficiency. American mechanical logic had taken a totally distinctive way. The Clark Gear Company in Buchanan, Michigan, had been creating fuel fabric dealing with gear since 1917, when they made the truck tractor for moving materials inside their possessed plant. This wasn't driven by military needs, but by the request of American shopper capitalism, which required effective development of products through production lines, distribution centers, and conveyance centers. By 1924, Clark had altered their plan with forks and a vertical pole, making what would ended up recognizable as the present-day forklift. The advancement proceeded through the 1930s. In 1938, Clark presented the car loader, the world's to begin with cutting-edge short-coup, coupled inner combustion forklift truck. This compact, maneuverable plan may lift overwhelming loads, stack them vertically, and work in limited spaces. By 1942, as America mobilized for war, Clark had created battery-powered forklifts that may work a complete move on a single charge, killing the required for refueling amid basic operations. When America entered the war, the civilian innovation was instantly adjusted for military utilize. Clark got to be a major provider of forklift trucks and tow tractors to join together states' powers amid World War II. Military acquirement records show that by 1943, American strengths were conveying forklifts at major supply warehouses, ports, and landing strips over North Africa. These machines weren't seen as extravagances by American organizers, but as fundamental drive multipliers that in a general sense changed the arithmetic of military coordinations. The effect was promptly clear in North Africa. At American supply stations in ports like Oran and Casablanca, a single trooper working a forklift may empty a truck in 15 minutes, an errand that required a dozen German troopers working for over an hour. The forklift administrator remained new after hours of work, whereas the German manual labor groups were exhausted after moving some tons of supplies. This wasn't essentially approximately speed. It was almost maintaining operations over time. American supply operations may run 24 hours a day, with administrators working in shifts, whereas German operations moderated significantly as troopers tired. The fight of Kasserine Pass in February 1943 given German officers there to begin with near-sea and American coordination strategies. In spite of the fact that the fight itself was a German strategic triumph, captured American supply dumps uncovered in plenitude that staggered Wehrmacht quartermasters. Not fair the amount of supplies, in spite of the fact that that was noteworthy sufficient, but the efficient organization made conceivable by mechanical taking care of hardware. Supplies were stacked on wooden beds, orchestrated in slick lines with clear paths for forklift get to, labeled and inventoried with exactness that manual dealing would may never accomplish. German coordination's officers watching American supply operations through field glasses famous the nearness of little vehicles with projecting forks that move between supply stacks, lifting and moving loads that would require whole squads of German warriors to handle. The American administrators sat comfortably, secured from the sun by overhead watches, moving tons of fabric without clear exertion. To German eyes, acclimated to seeing coordinations as a test of soldierly grit, this appeared nearly wanton. The numbers uncover the genuine scope of American generation and coordination's predominance. American industry amid the war delivered 297,000 airship, 193,000 gunnery pieces, 86,000 tanks, and over 2 million military trucks. But generation was, as it were, portion of the condition. The capacity to move these supplies proficiently from American industrial facilities to North African war zones required a coordination's transformation that the forklift exemplified. Consider the travel of ammo from an American production line to front lines in Tunisia. At the plant, forklifts stacked palletized ammo onto trains. At East Coast ports like modern York and Norfolk, forklifts exchanged these beds from trains to freedom ships. Upon entry in North African ports, forklifts emptied the ships onto trucks. At supply warehouses, forklifts organized and stacked supplies for simple get-to. Whereas forklifts were less common at forward supply focuses close combat zones, their effect on raised region proficiency liberated up labor for front lines. German coordinations, by differentiate, depended on manual labor at each range. German officers hand-loaded person shells and boxes onto trains. At ports, human chains passed supplies from hand to hand. Ships were emptied box by box, barrel by barrel. Supply dumps were regularly chaotic collections instead of organized stockrooms. The science were inexorable. Moving the same tonnage required distant more German officers, distant more time, and those officers arrived at the front as of now depleted from their coordination's obligations. The extraordinary temperatures of North Africa made this disparity even more articulated. Within the pulverizing warmth that regularly surpassed 128 Fahrenheit, German warriors performing overwhelming manual labor rapidly got to be warm casualties, drying out warm weariness and warm-stroke pulverized German coordination's units. American forklift administrators, by differentiate, performed their obligations from situated positions, regularly beneath shade, protecting their vitality and well-being. A single warm casualty among German supply troops might cool 20% decrease in a team's handling capacity. A warm casualty among American administrators may be rapidly supplanted by another prepared administrator. The German Tall Command's reaction to reports of American mechanical dealing with hardware uncovered a crucial misconception of present-day fighting. Orders from Berlin emphasized conventional German excellencies, superior organization, stricter teach, longer working hours. German officers were told to rouse their men to more noteworthy endeavors through enthusiastic admonishments and requests to warrior soul. What they required were machines. What they got were discourses. A few German coordinations officers who had worked in German industry. Sometime recently, the war caught on the increase of exertion that mechanical taking care given. They composed reports encouraging the selection of comparable hardware. These reports confronted skepticism from bosses who saw mechanical help as proof of declining warrior soul. The Wehrmachter's conventional accentuation on physical hardship as character building clashed with the down-to-earth reality of cutting-edge coordination's necessities. This state of mind reflected more profound German military culture. The Wehrmacht had acquired from the Prussian military convention a valorization of hardship as character building. Enduring was seen as a noble and mechanical help, as possibly debasing American military culture affected by mechanical effectiveness specialists, and trade hones took the inverse sea. Why squander human vitality on assignments machines may perform way better? Spare warriors' quality for errands, as it were people may perform, considering, battling, driving. The Africa Corps confronted another coordinations challenge that mechanical dealing may have reduced: the need of harbor capacity. Tobruk, the most pivot harbor in North Africa, seemed handled as there were almost 20,000 tons of supplies month to month, distant underneath the 100,000 tons the Africa Corps required. This bottleneck was incompletely due to constrained dock space, but generally due to the moderate pace of manual emptying. Ships sat in harbor for days being emptied by hand, when mechanical gears seemed to have cleared them in hours. American operations at North African ports illustrated what was conceivable with mechanical dealing with. At Casablanca, American engineers set up supply operations that moved 50,000 tons month to month through offices where French colonial specialists, utilizing basically manual labor, had already overseen as it were 10,000 tons. The distinction wasn't just forklifts, but a complete framework outline around mechanical dealing with bed standardization, distribution center format, transport planning, all optimized for mechanical operations. The mental effect on German troops was significant. Letters domestic from German officers, in spite of the fact that intensely censored, uncovered developing mindfulness of American fabric superiority. Soldiers composed almost observing American supply operations with a blend of shock and lose hope. The sheer effectiveness of American coordinations, symbolized by the forklift, spoke into a kind of fighting the Wehr hadn't expected. By spring 1943, indeed RML himself recognized the coordination's emergency. The Desert Fox, famous for his strategic brilliance, found himself progressively compelled not by associated combat control, but by basic failure to move supplies proficiently from ports to his strengths. His demands of Berlin for mechanical dealing with hardware confronted the reality that Germany needed both the mechanical capacity to produce such geared amount and significantly the fuel to function it. This fuel deficiency highlighted another advantage of American electric forklifts. Whereas German vehicles competed for valuable gasoline, American electric forklifts worked on battery, control charged by generators at raised ranges where fuel was more abundant. A German truck moving supplies expended fuel that might have fueled a tank. An American electric forklift expended power that had no elective military utilize. The Wehrmacht did have a few mechanical taking care of hardware, fundamentally cranes and lifts in raised regions in Germany and possessed domains, but this hardware was not one or the other standardized nor accessible in noteworthy amounts. German industry had delivered different sorts of lifting hardware, but these were regularly expansive specialized machines planned for production line or dock utilize, not the flexible versatile forklifts that Americans conveyed. In addition, German military conventions saw such hardware as having a place to inactive establishments, not versatile military operations. The fight of Medellin in Walk 1943 illustrated the aggregate impact of coordination's incongruities. RML's assault, his final in Africa, fizzled somewhat due to ammo deficiencies caused by wasteful supply taken care of. German ordnance batteries ran brief of shells, whereas American and British strengths provided by mechanically taken care coordinations kept up maintained bombardments. The arithmetic of present-day fighting had turned definitively against any constraint depending fundamentally on manual labor. As the Africa Corps withdrawn westbound through Libya and into Tunisia, they cleared out behind supply dumps that told the story of their coordination's disappointments. Scattered, disorganized heaps of gear, much of it harmed in dealing with, differentiated strongly with the flawless, palletized American supplies progressing behind them. German officers endeavoring to empty supplies found that what had taken days to empty by hand seemed not be rapidly reloaded for withdrawal. The ultimate yield in Tunisia in May 1943 brought over 230,000 pivot troopers into united imprisonment. Among them were thousands of coordination staff who would encounter American supply strategies firsthand as detainees of war. Their journey to jail camps within the joined-together states would demonstrate instructive in ways the Wehrmacht never aiming. German detainees transported to America traveled in relative consolation compared to their desires. Ships that might have carried cargo were productively stacked with detainees utilizing organized embarkation methods. Upon entering American ports like Norfolk, Virginia, and in New York, detainees seen forklift operations on a scale that overshadowed anything they had seen in Africa. These ports dealt with more tonnage in a day than German ports overseen in a week. At Camp Shelby, Mississippi, and other peak camps, German detainees relegated to work points of interest watched American coordination's operations. They observed forklifts empty hold, prepare cars of supplies in hours, assignments that would have taken days utilizing German manual strategies. Previous coordination's officers among the detainees calculated that a single American warehouse dealt with more supplies every day than whole German divisions had overseen to move in a week of serious operations. The detainees, moreover, watched something that challenged Nazi belief system. Numerous forklift administrators were African Americans, individuals of isolated officer units. In spite of confronting separation inside American society, these warriors worked complex apparatus with ability that German racial hypothesis said was outlandish for evidently second-rate races. The mechanical advantage given by the forklift made the administrator's race insignificant. What mattered was ability in working the machine. A few German detainees were utilized in American distribution centers and ranches where they learned to function agrarian hardware and sometimes materials dealing with gear. The change from skepticism to appreciation was frequently fast. Detainees who had expelled mechanical taking care of as American shortcoming found that such gear permitted them to achieve more, whereas protecting their vitality. Their perceptions would afterward impact German mechanical homes. The differentiate with German coordinations got to be indeed starker as detainees learned around American generation strategies. They found that American production lines were creating materials taking care of hardware in noteworthy amounts, with each machine speaking to the cargo, taking care of capacity of different laborers. The same mechanical base that delivered this gear was at the same time creating trucks, tanks, airplane, and ships in amounts that appeared outlandish to minds. Molded by German shortage. The German military's disappointment to appreciate mechanical dealing with hardware reflected broader shortcomings in German military culture. The accentuation on over fabric, soul over innovation, and convention over advancement made day spots that demonstrated expensive. Whereas German engineers created impressive weapons just like the V-2 rocket and fly airplane, they dismissed the ordinary but basic advances that really maintained military operations. This disregard stemmed from essential errors around cutting-edge fighting. German military scholars centered on operational craftsmanship, the development and engagement of huge arrangements. American military organizers progressively centered on coordinations, the science of moving supplies to bolster those arrangements. The Germans culminated quick assault, but couldn't maintain it. The Americans may have been less exquisite strategically, but might support operations inconclusively through predominant coordinations. The forklift represented something bigger than fair mechanical dealing with. It encapsulated a whole logic of fighting that esteemed effectiveness over convention, pragmatism over belief system, and comes about over appearances. Each American forklift working in North Africa was articulation that present-day war was won not by warrior spirit alone, but by mechanical capacity productively connected. After Germany's yield in May 1945, the complete degree of the coordination's difference got to be clear. United agents examining German military records found that the Wehrmacht had never completely mechanized its coordinations, depending on steeds and manual labor all through the war. Indeed, tip-top units, just like the Afrika Korps, depicted in publicity as completely mechanized, had depended intensely on manual dealing with for supply operations. The occupation of Germany given an exhibit of American coordination strategies. American strengths utilized their mechanical taking care of hardware to clear rubble from bombarded cities, disseminate nourishment to civilians, and modify foundation. German civilians, who had been told for a long time around American shortcoming, observe as American hardware, fulfilled in hours what German work groups required days to total. The Marshall Range, starting in 1948, quickened German selection of American coordination strategies. American councils didn't fair give cash, but moreover information, counting preparing and mechanical effectiveness and mechanical taking care of. German production lines that had delivered weapons, presently started creating mechanical gear, frequently joining American planned standards. The change from resistance to eagerness was astoundingly quick. By 1950, West German companies were fabricating their possessed materials, taking care gear with former Wehrmacht officers frequently included within the change. These men had learned through involvement that mechanical taking care of wasn't shortcoming, but effectiveness. They brought to German industry an excitement for American coordination strategies, decided that Germany would never once more drop behind in this pivotal zone. The Korean War given an unforeseen boost to German mechanical recuperation. American strengths requiring extra hardware contracted with German producers. The previous foe was presently creating gear for its previous victor. German-made mechanical merchandise consolidating advancements on American plans started showing up in universal markets. By 1955, the change was total. West Germany had ended up one of Europe's driving mechanical makers. German mechanical hardware was traded universally, competing with American models in worldwide markets. The understudy had not just learned from the teacher, but was starting to improve and progress upon the initial lessons. The establishing of the Bunds, West Germany's modern military constraint in 1955, consolidated hard-learned lessons, approximately coordinations. Mechanical taking care of gear was considered as fundamental as weapons. Every Bundeswehr coordinations unit was prepared with present-day gear. German warriors were prepared to function mechanical, dealing with hardware as a fundamental military expertise. The differentiate with Wehrmacht teaching may not have been more total. Mechanical measurements told the story of change. Sometime recently the war, German distribution centers and manufacturing plants had negligible mechanical taking care of hardware. By 1960, West Germany had broad mechanical dealing with frameworks in operation. German mechanical efficiency, modified on standards of mechanical proficiency, was accomplishing development rates that inspired financial spectators. The philosophical change was indeed more significant than the physical one. German mechanical culture, once glad of its capacity for difficult work and manual ability, grasped mechanical help as the way to success. The work ethic that had once valorized physical exertion presently valorized productivity. Working shrewd supplanted working difficult as the most elevated ethicalness. Veterans of the Africa Corps, numerous presently working in German industry, got to be advocates for mechanical dealing with. They talked at mechanical conferences, composed articles and exchanged diaries, and instructed more youthful laborers almost the significance of coordination's proficiency. Their message was steady. Germany had misplaced the war not basically on war zones, but in supply warehouses where American mechanical effectiveness had overwhelmed German manual strategies. By 1965, German building was starting to exceed expectations in materials dealing with innovation. German engineers, with their conventional fabulousness in mechanical building, created advancements in water-powered frameworks, security highlights, and ergonomic plan. The German mechanical division was now not replicating American models, but making unique plans that set and use guidelines. The financial miracle of West Germany within the 1950s and 60s was built incompletely on coordination's effectiveness learned from American illustrations. German industrial facilities prepared with progressed mechanical taking care of frameworks accomplished efficiency levels that awed worldwide spectators. Each piece of German materials taking care of hardware working in these production lines was an update of lessons learned through Vanquish. The differentiate with East Germany was instructive. Beneath Soviet impact, East German industry kept on depending intensely on manual labor, seeing mechanical dealing with as capitalist extravagance. The efficiency hole between East and West Germany extended annually, with mechanical dealing with effectiveness being one of the key differentiators. When reunification came in 1990, East German laborers were astounded by the mechanical taking care of gear standard in each West German office. Military history specialists considering World War II coordinations have concluded that mechanical taking care of gear, in spite of the fact that unglamorous compared to tanks and airship, was one of the vital innovations influencing coordination's proficiency. The capacity to move supplies productively from industrial facilities to front lines impacted which armed forces seemed support operations and which battled with coordination's disappointment. The Wehrmacht, for all its strategic brilliance, never completely illuminated this principal condition. The forklift effect amplified past military applications to reshape worldwide commerce. The standardized bed plan for forklift taking care of got to be the fundamental unit of international exchange. Shipping holders measure for effective mechanical dealing with revolutionized oceanic commerce. The worldwide economy that developed after World War II was built on establishments of productive materials taking care of. Present-day military strengths generally recognize mechanical taking care of as basic to operations. No major military drive nowadays would consider depending basically on manual labor for coordination's operations. The lesson illustrated by American mechanical effectiveness in North Africa has been altogether ingested. Mechanical advantage in coordinations is as imperative as capability in combat. The German involvement speaks to one of history's most total changes in mechanical logic. A military culture that had rejected mechanical taking care of as shortcoming grasped it as basic to both military and financial control. This change required not fair receiving modern innovation, but changing principal convictions around quality, work, and proficiency. Today's German coordinations industry is exceedingly progressed in development and productivity. German companies create modern mechanical dealing with hardware. German coordinations ability is traded universally through counseling administrations and gear deals. The country that once rejected mechanical materials taken care of has ended up a worldwide pioneer within the innovation. The imagery reverberates through decades. The forklift, that straightforward machine with two metal prongs, challenged not fair German armed forces, but German presumptions approximately the nature, quality, and effectiveness. It illustrated that genuine control comes not from human muscle alone, but from human insights connected to mechanical advantage. The Wehrmacht learned this lesson as well late to maintain a strategic distance from overcome, but altogether sufficient to guarantee it would never be overlooked. In military historical centers over Germany, protected illustrations of American hardware from World War II are shown nearby tanks and flying machine. These machines, unglamorous and utilitarian, tell a story as vital as any combat vehicle. They remind guests that wars are won not fair by boldness and strategies, but by the effectiveness of moving supplies from one place to another. The ultimate lesson is both straightforward and significant. Countries that rejected mechanical advancement as shortcoming do so at their danger. German officers who expelled American mechanical taken care of in 1942 seem not envision these machines would contribute to their vanquish. They saw mechanical help as debauchery when it was really advancement. They esteemed conventional quality, whereas their foes duplicated quality through innovation. The change was considerable by the 1970s when German producers were offering gear globally. The circle had closed. The understudy had ended up fulfilled, but the lesson remained. Never reject an advancement, essentially since it makes work less demanding. In cutting-edge fighting in present-day industry, making work less demanding implies finishing more with less, and those who finish more with less pick up advantage. Standing in a present-day German stockroom, observing advanced equipment move merchandise with computerized accuracy, it's troublesome to assume that such machines were once expelled as pointless by a proficient military. However, that expulsion established in social suspicions and conventional considering contributed to Germany's coordination's challenges in World War II. The Wehrmacht that rejected mechanical dealing with was eventually vanquished by the effectiveness it's spoken to. The triumph of mechanical productivity was incremental but definitive. No landmarks commemorate materials dealing with brilliance. No awards were struck for coordination's proficiency. However, mechanical taking care off changed fighting by illustrating that in mechanical struggle, the side that moved supplies most reductively picked up noteworthy advantage. This lesson learned in North African deserts where German warriors depleted themselves, whereas American gear work ceaselessly resounds in each cutting-edge military coordinations operation. The story of German states of mind toward mechanical taking care of is eventually a cautionary story approximately the threats of rejecting development that challenges social suspicions. The Wehrmacht entered World War II sure that German teach in physical quality would overcome American mechanical strategies. They found in step that mechanical helped duplicate a human capability in ways that no sum of teach might coordinate. Mechanical taking care of didn't supplant human quality. It intensified it. Understanding this refinement prior might have changed German coordination's hones. The bequest proceeds in worldwide supply chains. Each productively taken care of stack in today's commerce. Each holder moved in cutting-edge ports. Each distribution center working with mechanical accuracy follows its advancement to the coordination's advancement of World War II. The mechanical dealing with that German officers expelled in North Africa got to be the establishment of worldwide commerce. In that change from military need to commercial ubiquity lies the vindication of effective coordination's logic. Nowadays, as mechanization changes coordinations once more, the lesson remains significant. Military powers that reject and use innovations as superfluous complications hazard coordination's wastefulness. The side that moves supplies most proficiently keeps up advantage, whether those supplies are moved by conventional strategies or modern innovations. The German travel from expelling to grasping mechanical dealing with instructs that military prevalence requires more than progressed weapons and courageous warriors. It requires grasping advancements that increase human capability, indeed when those developments challenge conventional concepts. The Wehrmacht fizzled to memorize this lesson in time to dodge vanquish. Their successors learned it so completely that Germany became a pioneer in exceptionally innovation they had once expelled. Within the conclusion, mechanical proficiency demonstrated unequivocal in coordinations, not through coordinate combat, but through the arithmetic of supply productivity. Whereas German troopers depleted themselves moving supplies physically, American mechanical strategies moved endless amounts of fabric that supported partnered armed forces over land masses. Straightforward machines had contributed to changing fighting, instructing a lesson around advanced struggle that remained substantial. In mechanical war, mechanical advantage in coordinations gives vital benefits. The change was intensive, the lesson ingested, the innovation received, and eventually refined by those who had at first rejected it. Germany's travel from expelling mechanical taken care of as shortcoming to getting to be a pioneer in materials dealing with innovation speaks to one of history's eminent inversions. In that inversion lies shrewdness important for any military drive or country. Dismissing innovation since it challenges conventional presumptions around quality, work, or proficiency can demonstrate costly. The cost of such expulsion is found within the deserts of North Africa, contributed altogether to coordination's disappointment and extreme overcome.